The pink invitation slipped from my trembling hands as my daughter's words echoed in the room. My wish is simple. I want you to die. Her voice was calm, like someone ordering coffee, but her eyes burned with something darker. The silence after that sentence wasn't silence at all. It roared inside me, heavier than any scream. I felt my throat close, the air catching. The clock on the wall ticked too loud, each second stabbing at my chest. She just stood there, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, a smirk pulling at her lips. My little girl, my baby. And now she wanted me gone. I whispered her name, hoping she'd laugh, say it was a cruel joke. But she didn't blink. She didn't move, just stared, unshaken, as if my begging was pathetic background noise. My knees felt weak, and I grabbed the edge of the table to stop myself from falling. Her voice cut again. It would make everything easier if you just disappeared before my birthday. My birthday gift to her. My absence. The pink invitation glowed between us like a curse. For a second, I thought she might snatch it and rip it apart, but she didn't. She wanted me broken, not paper. I need to stop here and tell you, if you think this is already unbelievable, subscribe now, because what happened after this moment, it's something you won't want to miss. I swallowed hard and asked, "Why would you say that to me?" She laughed softly, shaking her head like I was too naive to understand. Her perfume lingered in the air, sweet but sharp, the kind that sticks to your clothes even when the person leaves. She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her phone and started typing, her nails clicking against the screen, each tap like a hammer against my ribs. I wanted to grab it from her, to see who she was texting, but I froze. Fear wrapped around my wrists, holding me in place. In that frozen second, memories rushed back, nights working double shifts, selling even my wedding ring just to keep her in school. Every sacrifice replayed in my mind, only to collide with her cold eyes now. The daughter I built my life around was dismantling me with a single sentence. She finally looked up, phone in hand. "Don't make this harder, Mom. Just accept it. You've done enough." Her words sliced, sharper than any knife. Done enough. Like I was a finished project, ready to be discarded. I tried to smile, tried to pretend I misunderstood. "You mean, you're joking, right? That's what this is?" My voice cracked, more a plea than a question. But her expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened, cementing her cruelty. She brushed past me, the hem of her dress brushing my leg, and the faint scent of her hair filling the space between us. I turned to watch her walk away, her shoulders straight, her steps deliberate, like someone leaving a courtroom after winning a case. I stayed frozen in that room, staring at the invitation on the floor. The pink paper mocked me, bright against the dull tiles. I bent down, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. Her birthday, the day she wanted me erased. But then something else caught my eye. An envelope under the sofa, half hidden. My heart pounded as I reached for it. It wasn't mine. It wasn't supposed to be there. The handwriting on it wasn't mine either. I opened it slowly, my pulse racing. Inside was a note, short but suffocating. "Everything is ready. Just make sure she doesn't make it to the party." My vision blurred, the words swimming in front of me. Who had written it? Who was she? My daughter? Or me? I pressed the paper to my chest, my breath shallow. This wasn't just teenage cruelty anymore. This was planning. Conspiracy, a decision already made. I stumbled toward the kitchen, needing water, needing anything to ground me. The glass slipped in my hand, shattering across the floor, sharp edges glinting under the light. My reflection stared back at me in the shards, tired, broken, and now hunted. I pressed my palms against the counter, trying to steady myself. My daughter's footsteps echoed from the hallway. She stopped at the doorway, watching me over the broken glass. And then she smiled. That smile. Not of a child, not even of a teenager, but of someone who already knew the ending to a story I hadn't caught up to yet. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to ask why, but fear glued my lips shut. She didn't move, just leaned casually against the door frame, as if enjoying the show of me crumbling. The house suddenly felt like a stranger's. Every photo on the wall, every plate on the shelf, every little memory we'd built, it all turned against me. My sanctuary had become my trap. And then, As if to drive the nail deeper, she said softly, "Don't worry, Mom. You won't feel a thing." My heart stopped. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Her phone buzzed again, and she looked at the screen with a quick smirk. Someone else was in on this. I wasn't imagining it anymore. This was bigger than her words, bigger than my fear. I wanted to grab the phone, smash it, beg her to stop. But before I could even move, she slipped it into her pocket, lifted her chin, and whispered, "1 week, that's all. 1 week. My deadline. My countdown." And as she turned her back and walked away, I noticed something else fall from her pocket. A small silver key. My heart dropped. It wasn't just any key. It was mine, the spare to the house. And she didn't even notice she'd dropped it. I bent down, my fingers brushing the cold metal. And in that instant, I realized, my own daughter wasn't just wishing for my death. She was preparing for it. And that's when I heard the faint creak of the front door. Someone else was already inside. The creak of the front door lingered in my mind all night, but by morning, it was gone, replaced by another kind of weight, the memories of everything I had given up for her. I sat at the kitchen table with a chipped mug of coffee, staring at my hands, the same hands that once stitched her torn uniforms, scrubbed floors after my shifts, and pawned off treasures that meant the world to me. My wedding ring had been the hardest. I remember the pawn shop's stale smell, the clerk's impatient glance as he slid a few bills across the counter, and how I held back tears, telling myself it was for her future, for her happiness. Every month was a calculation of what could go, what I could live without. The gold bracelet my mother gave me before she died, gone. The antique sewing machine my grandmother swore was lucky, gone. Each object carried a story, and each time I let one go, I told myself I was buying another chapter of her education, another chance for her to stand taller than I ever did. But in her eyes, my sacrifices were invisible, erased like chalk on a wet sidewalk. She would sneer at my clothes, laugh at the way I counted coins before paying bills, as if frugality was a disease. I once sold my favorite armchair, the one where I used to rock her to sleep. She didn't even notice when it vanished from the corner of the living room. She only noticed when a new pair of shoes appeared at her doorstep, wrapped neatly in tissue paper. "Finally," she had said with a roll of her eyes, as if I had done the bare minimum instead of tearing out another piece of myself. It was moments like that which twisted inside me, moments where love felt like currency, and I was always bankrupt. But the cruelest part was the way she looked at me in public. If I showed up at her school wearing an old blouse, she would look away, pretending not to know me. She once muttered under her breath, "Couldn't you at least try to look like a real mom?" Those words stung sharper than hunger pangs. I bit my tongue, smiled anyway, and told myself she was just a teenager, embarrassed, not hateful. But deep down, I wondered if the rot had already set in. I carried her future on my back like a mule carrying bricks, and every time she flung an insult, I convinced myself it was just a phase. I remembered nights I skipped dinner so she could eat, the way my stomach growled in the quiet, and how she never asked why I didn't take a plate for myself. Maybe she noticed, maybe she didn't. But she never asked, not once. There were days when I thought she might turn, when she would hug me unexpectedly, or slip a thank you into a rushed sentence. I clung to those rare crumbs of affection as if they were entire loaves of bread. But like crumbs, they disappeared too quickly, leaving me hungrier each time. And I kept waiting, starving for her love, convincing myself the feast would come one day. When she laughed at my food, calling it poor food, I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her that every spice, every recipe was a memory of survival, a story of resilience. Instead, I smiled weakly and told her she could order pizza if she wanted. I let her mockery stain me quietly, telling myself love was stronger than humiliation. But sometimes, late at night, I would sit in that empty kitchen and wonder if love really was enough. I even remember the first time she demanded something beyond my reach. A study trip abroad, with costs so high they might as well have been asking me to buy a piece of the moon. I cried in the bathroom that night, tears mixing with soap suds as I scrubbed the sink. How could I tell her no? So I didn't. I borrowed from people I knew would never forgive me if I failed to pay. I buried myself in debt just to see her boarding that bus, her face lit up with pride. Not for me, but for herself. And yet, when she came back from that trip, she barely spoke to me. She posted photos online, thanked her friends for making it unforgettable, but never once mentioned the woman who had bled for her to go. That was the moment I realized my sacrifices weren't seeds. They were ashes. Everything I gave burned up before it could bloom. Still, I kept going. Mothers do. We keep giving until there's nothing left. And I told myself she would understand one day, maybe when she became a mother herself. But the way she looked at me last night, the way she said those words, "I want you to die," it shattered that hope into pieces so small they could never be reassembled. And you know what burns the most? I never wanted much. Just respect. Just a little gratitude. Maybe a hug every now and then. Instead, I was the shadow in the background, the invisible scaffolding that held up her life while she spat on the foundation. But last night changed everything. Because when she dropped that key, when I held it in my hand, I realized the sacrifices had turned against me. I had built her a future so secure that she no longer needed me in it. In fact, I had built her a future where I was an obstacle, something to be removed. The note I found, the one hidden under the sofa, still burned in my pocket. Everything is ready. Just make sure she doesn't make it to the party. Hey, I read it over and over, hoping I misunderstood. But each time the words stayed the same. They were preparing for me to vanish. And then the thought came, chilling and undeniable. What if all those sacrifices had been a mistake? What if every object I sold, every meal I skipped, every debt I buried myself in, had been feeding not love, but a monster? The house was quiet now, too quiet, but I could feel the weight of her presence in every corner. My daughter, the child I raised alone, the reason I sacrificed everything, she was planning my end. And as I sat at that kitchen table, the chipped mug still warm in my hands, I realized the scariest part wasn't that she wanted me gone. The scariest part was that she had been preparing for it for far longer than I knew. And that's when I noticed something scratched into the bottom of the invitation. Faint, almost invisible, like someone had tried to hide it. 3 words, carved in shaky handwriting. 1 week left. The words carved into the invitation haunted me all morning. But when I walked into the kitchen, I didn't even have time to think about them. She was already there, sipping orange juice like nothing had happened, her legs crossed elegantly at the table. Her eyes darted to my clothes, an old blouse with a frayed sleeve, and her lips curled into a smirk. "Really, Mom? You're going out like that?" The sting wasn't in the words alone, but in the way she said them, loud enough that even the neighbor watering her plants outside could hear. My cheeks flushed hot, shame flooding me like boiling water. It wasn't the first time she had done this. She loved to point out my flaws in front of others, as if my humiliation was her form of entertainment. At the grocery store, she once laughed at me for comparing prices too long, shouting across the aisle, "Stop being so cheap! People are staring!" I wanted to sink into the floor. Every eye that turned felt like a dagger, and I stood there frozen, holding a carton of milk, praying the ground would swallow me whole. That night, I cried silently in bed, muffling the sobs with a pillow so she wouldn't hear. But she knew. She always knew. And somehow, she seemed to enjoy it. There was a time she invited friends over for dinner, and I spent hours cooking, pouring every ounce of energy I had left into the meal. When I finally placed the dishes on the table, waiting for her approval, she wrinkled her nose. "Sorry, guys. My mom only knows how to cook poor food." The laughter that followed was like broken glass in my ears. I sat at the end of the table, smiling faintly, pretending it didn't matter. But inside, I was crumbling. I can still see her rolling her eyes when I tried to defend myself. "You wouldn't understand, Mom," she said, pushing the plate away dramatically. "People like you never do. People like me." As if I were some separate species. As if I didn't even belong in the same room as her. That sentence buried itself deep inside me, and I carried it like a splinter I couldn't pull out. Every time I looked at her after that, the words echoed back. Her cruelty wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came in whispers, quiet enough that only I could hear. She would lean close in public, her perfume overwhelming, and murmur, "Don't embarrass me." A simple sentence, but it felt like a slap. My existence itself embarrassed her. The woman who had given her life, fed her, clothed her, stayed awake during fevers, worked until her body broke, was now nothing but a source of shame. And the worst part? I accepted it. I convinced myself that if I endured it long enough, she'd eventually realize my worth. Mothers are supposed to be patient, forgiving, unshakable. But patience had turned me into a doormat. Forgiveness had hollowed me out, and my unshakable love was slowly killing me. Still, I stayed. Still, I endured. There were moments, brief flashes, where I thought I saw love in her. A quick hug before she left for school. A casual thanks tossed over her shoulder. But they always vanished as quickly as they came, leaving me hungrier for affection than before. I learned to live off scraps, to convince myself crumbs of kindness were enough. But deep down, I knew they weren't. She started mocking my voice too, the way I mispronounced English words, laughing with her friends about how backward I sounded. I caught her once imitating me behind my back, her arms flailing, her tone exaggerated. The laughter of her friends filled the room, and my chest tightened. It wasn't just teasing. It was erasure. She wasn't laughing with me. She was laughing at the woman who had given her everything. One evening, she snapped a photo of me while I was half asleep on the couch, mouth open, hair messy. The next day, I discovered it posted online with the caption, "This is why I can't invite anyone over." The likes and laughing emojis stacked up beneath it. I stared at the screen for hours, numb, realizing that my daughter's shame wasn't just private anymore, it was public. I had become her joke, her punchline. I wanted to confront her, to ask her why she hated me so much. But when I tried, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "You're too dramatic." That was her shield, accusing me of exaggeration, of weakness. She turned my pain into an overreaction, my tears into comedy. It left me speechless, stripped of any ground to stand on. Still, I worked harder. I kept the house spotless, cooked her favorite meals, and even borrowed money to buy her a dress she had been eyeing in a store window. When I gave it to her, waiting for gratitude, she simply glanced at it and said, "Took you long enough." No hug, no thank you. Just entitlement, as if love was nothing but a transaction she deserved. I knew something was deeply wrong the night I overheard her whispering to a friend on the phone, "She's pathetic. Honestly, I don't even need her anymore." I stood in the hallway, my back pressed to the wall, the shadows swallowing me. The words rang louder than gunfire. My heart raced, but I didn't step forward. I couldn't. I stood there, frozen, listening to my own child dismiss me as disposable. And yet, despite everything, I kept searching for excuses. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she didn't mean it. Maybe deep down she still loved me, but didn't know how to show it. The lies I told myself were heavier than any truth. I carried them around like armor, but they only made me sink deeper. But last night changed something inside me. Her words, "I want you to die," were not just another humiliation. They were a verdict, and the note I found confirmed it. There was someone else involved, someone helping her. It wasn't just cruelty anymore. It was calculation. As I held the invitation again that night, my eyes went back to the carved words, "1 week left." My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. For the first time, I wondered if the humiliations were not just spite, but rehearsal. If every insult, every laugh, every dismissal was simply preparing me for the final act. And just when I thought I couldn't bear another revelation, I opened the pantry to grab some tea, and found something I wasn't supposed to see. A small box tucked behind the flour. Inside it, neatly folded, was a document with my name at the top, and under it, in letters too clear to deny, the word "deceased." The box slipped from my hands and landed on the floor with a dull thud, the sound echoing through the quiet kitchen. Papers scattered across the tiles, curling at the edges like they had been handled too often. My breath hitched when I saw it again. The word "deceased" printed above my name. My hands trembled as I reached for the top sheet, the ink blurring as tears welled in my eyes. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a draft, it was prepared, deliberate, waiting. I sat there on the cold floor, surrounded by documents that spoke of my absence as if it were already fact. Bank slips, insurance notes, and the beginnings of a forged signature I instantly recognized as hers. My daughter's handwriting, sloppy in places, but still undeniably hers. It was the same hand that once wrote me crayon letters saying, "I love you, Mommy." Now it spelled out my death. The contrast ripped through me like a knife. Then I noticed something even worse. The space for date of death left blank, as though they were simply waiting to fill it in. My stomach churned. This wasn't an empty threat. This wasn't just anger or rebellion. This was intent. I gathered the papers quickly, shoving them back into the box. But a smaller object caught my attention before I closed it. The missing spare key, lying beneath the documents. The silver key glinted under the dim kitchen light, and I froze. That key had vanished weeks ago, and I had convinced myself I misplaced it. But here it was, hidden alongside the proof of my planned erasure. My daughter had taken it. My daughter had kept it. And now I realized she didn't just want me gone. She wanted access, control, ownership of everything I would leave behind. I held it in my palm, the metal cold against my skin, and my mind raced back to every time she had brushed past me laughing, saying, "Soon all this will be mine." I thought it was just cruelty, just words meant to wound. But no, she had meant it literally. The walls, the furniture, the roof above my head, everything I sacrificed to hold together, she already considered hers. That night, when she returned from wherever she had been, I forced myself to stay calm. I placed the key back where I found it, careful not to give myself away. She strolled in, humming a tune, her phone glowing in her hand. I watched her eyes flick briefly toward the kitchen, like she knew exactly what was hidden there. My heart pounded, but I said nothing. I couldn't reveal yet what I had discovered. She walked past me, tossing her jacket on the couch, and smirked. "Don't wait up for me tomorrow," she said casually. My chest tightened. The way she said it, so confident, so sure of herself, told me she was already one step ahead. I nodded, pretending not to care, pretending I was still blind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak of the house. I thought about that key, about how many times she might have used it already without me knowing. Did she let someone inside while I was at work? Did they stand in my room, looking at my things, planning? The thought made me shiver, pulling the blanket tighter around me as if it could shield me. I remembered when I first gave her the spare key years ago, just for emergencies. She had held it in her small hand, her eyes shining with trust. "Now I can always get home. Right, Mommy?" she had said. That memory clawed at me now, soiled by her betrayal. That key wasn't for emergencies anymore. It was for my erasure. The following day, I tested her. I asked casually if she had seen the spare key, watching her face closely. She froze for just a fraction of a second, then shrugged. "You probably lost it. Like you always lose things." The words were smooth, but her eyes betrayed her. They flicked away too fast, a little too defensive. I knew she was lying. I smiled faintly, nodding as if I believed her. "Maybe you're right." My voice was steady, but inside I was screaming. I had confirmed it. She wasn't just cruel. She was orchestrating something, and she wasn't doing it alone. That note I found was proof of another shadow moving in the background. Later, while she showered, I crept back to the box. I ran my fingers over the papers again, stopping at one line that made my blood run cold. Transfer of property, in case of death. My house, my sacrifices, everything I had built. And next to the line marked beneficiary, her name was written in bold, as though stamped by fate. I felt sick, pressing my back against the cabinet for support. All those years of sacrifice, all those humiliations, all the sleepless nights, had they led to this moment? To my daughter, treating me as nothing more than a stepping stone, a signature on a form, a body to be erased? The thought clawed at my chest until I could barely breathe. I gathered the documents and pushed the box back into its hiding place. But as I turned to leave, my hand brushed against another envelope, smaller, tucked even deeper. My curiosity overpowered my fear. I slid it open, and pulled out a single photo. My blood turned to ice. It was me, sleeping, my mouth slightly open, vulnerable, unaware. Someone had taken it recently, from inside my own home. That was when I understood. The key wasn't just symbolic. It wasn't just about ownership. It was proof that the walls I thought protected me no longer did. And with that photo in my shaking hands, I realized something even darker. Whoever was helping her had already been inside. The photo burned in my hands long after I put it back in the envelope. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself lying there, asleep, defenseless, a stranger's shadow hovering nearby with a camera. The thought gnawed at me through the night, until exhaustion finally dragged me under. But even then, I dreamed of footsteps circling my bed, of whispers in the dark. I woke drenched in sweat, clutching the blanket like a shield, my ears straining at every sound in the house. That morning, as I made coffee with shaking hands, I heard it, the faint vibration of her phone on the counter. She was in the shower, steam fogging the bathroom door, and for a second, I considered picking it up. My heart raced, telling me not to, but my curiosity was louder. I flipped it open, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped it. There it was, an audio message, half played. My blood froze when I heard her voice. She'll be gone before the party, I promise. Her tone was calm, confident, like someone finalizing dinner plans, not speaking about her own mother. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me, the screen dimming as it clattered against the counter. My pulse hammered in my ears, louder than the running shower. For a moment, I thought I would faint. The shower stopped, panic surged, and I quickly slid the phone back where I found it. She walked into the kitchen minutes later, a towel wrapped around her hair, her eyes locking onto me with unnerving sharpness. "What?" she asked, suspicion lacing the single word. My throat was dry, my lips refusing to move. I forced a smile, shaking my head. Nothing, but I knew she could see the fear written all over me. I tried to focus on the ordinary things, on the clink of the spoon against the mug, on the morning light filtering through the curtains. But ordinary no longer existed in this house. Everything was tainted now. Her words, her objects, even her silences. Especially her silences. She watched me too long, too still, before turning away and pouring herself a drink. I exhaled only when her back was to me. Later that day, while she was out, I paced the living room, my hands gripping my temples. My daughter wasn't just cruel. She wasn't just ungrateful. She was planning my disappearance, calmly, with someone else's help. Every detail confirmed it. The forged documents, the key, the photo, and now the audio. And the deadline was clear. Her birthday, the party, my final curtain. For years, I had endured her mockery, her insults, her coldness, telling myself it was just a phase. But this was different. This was lethal. I pressed my palms against the window glass, staring out at the world beyond, wondering if anyone out there could see me drowning. I wanted to scream for help, but shame choked me. Who would believe a mother saying her daughter wanted her dead? I thought of calling the police, of running to a neighbor, of begging someone to listen. But then I remembered the look in her eyes, the certainty in her voice. She would twist it. She would turn it against me. She was smart, too smart, and I had no proof anyone would believe. A forged will, a missing key, a single audio. That wasn't enough. She could say I was paranoid, losing my mind. Maybe they would even believe her. That night, as I lay in bed pretending to sleep, I heard her door creak open. My heart stilled. Her steps were soft, almost careful, as if she didn't want to wake me. I kept my breathing steady, shallow, the way a child pretends during hide-and-seek. My skin prickled as I felt her presence at the doorway. Seconds passed, like hours. Then, finally, her steps retreated, her door closing with a faint click. I didn't move until dawn lit the room. I knew then that I couldn't wait passively for whatever was coming. Something had to change. But fear has a way of rooting you in place, convincing you that silence is safer than action. I convinced myself I needed more time, more evidence, more certainty. Yet every tick of the clock reminded me I didn't have time. I had 1 week. The following afternoon, I tried to catch her off guard. I asked casually, "Are you excited about your birthday?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "More than you know," she said, her lips curling into a smile I couldn't read. It wasn't joy. It was anticipation. My stomach knotted. The birthday wasn't just a celebration. It was the deadline. "And you? What would you do in my place? Would you confront her? Run? Stay silent? Tell me in the comments. Because maybe I'm not the only one who's faced betrayal from the person they love most." That evening, I wandered into her room while she was out, my fingers shaking as I searched through drawers. Clothes, makeup, notebooks, all normal. For a moment, I thought maybe I was losing my mind. But then, at the bottom of her desk, taped to the wood, I found it. Another note. This one shorter, colder. "Don't fail this time." My legs nearly gave out. This wasn't the first attempt. My mind raced back through the months, the strange smells in the kitchen, the near accidents on the stairs, the nights I woke coughing from smoke with no source. My breath caught. She had already tried. She was just waiting for the perfect moment. I sat on her bed, clutching the note, my chest tightening with every breath. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, sweet and poisonous. I stared at the mirror across from me, at my reflection pale and shaking, and for the first time I thought, maybe she has already won. Maybe I was already dead in her eyes. And then I noticed something else, half hidden beneath the pillow. A small black device with a red light blinking faintly. I leaned closer, my stomach dropping as realization hit. It was recording. She wasn't just planning. She was documenting. Proof, evidence. Of what? I didn't yet know. But it was clear. Every move I made was already being watched. The blinking red light stared at me like an unblinking eye, and my blood ran cold. I yanked the device from under the pillow, my fingers trembling so hard I almost dropped it. Was it a camera? A recorder? Both? I pressed a button, and the tiny screen flickered to life. My heart clenched as I saw myself on it, sleeping, cooking, crying alone in the kitchen. Hours of my life stolen, documented, turned into evidence for something I didn't yet understand. She had been watching me, studying me, preparing. I shoved the device back where I found it, terrified she would notice my intrusion. My pulse thundered as I slipped out of her room, closing the door softly behind me. Each creak of the floor felt like a gunshot, each second stretching unbearably long. I collapsed on my bed and buried my face in the pillow, shaking. What was she building? A case? A trap? Or was it just entertainment for her, watching me unravel day after day? The next morning, I found more proof. A stack of receipts tucked into the kitchen drawer. Strange purchases I didn't recognize. Notebooks, legal stamps, consultations with lawyers. Some were in her name, some in another's. A man's name I didn't know. My throat closed as I pieced it together. She wasn't just waiting for me to vanish. She was already preparing the aftermath. A house transferred. A life erased. A death legitimized. Then, inside a folded envelope, I saw something that turned my stomach. A will. My will. Only it wasn't mine. My signature stretched across the bottom of the page, a near-perfect imitation. All possessions and property to be transferred to my daughter. The words danced before my eyes. Cruel. Final. I couldn't breathe. The ink wasn't even dry. It meant this was happening soon. Sooner than I wanted to believe. I stumbled back, gripping the counter as dizziness overwhelmed me. How many times had she practiced forging my name? How long had this plan been growing, festering in the shadows of our home? Every sacrifice I made had become a stepping stone for her ambition. I gave her everything, and now she wanted the last piece of me, my absence. I tore the papers into pieces and stuffed them deep into the trash. But even as I did, I knew it was useless. She would just make another copy, print another page. Destroying one document wouldn't stop what was already in motion. The deadline wasn't months away or years, it was days, a week at most. My expiration date was already circled in red. That night, I pretended to sleep again, though my eyes stayed open in the dark. I listened to the house breathe, the pipes groaning, the wind rattling the shutters, the faint footsteps in the hall. And then, just after midnight, I heard it, her whisper, low, careful but clear. Everything is set for the party. Don't worry. My chest tightened. She wasn't talking to me. She was on the phone, her voice slicing through the silence like a blade. I bit down on the blanket, tears spilling hot against my cheeks. The party. That was the finish line. I was never meant to be there to see her blow out the candles. My daughter's wish was my deadline, and I had only days left to decide whether to run, fight, or wait for the inevitable. In the morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She sat at the table, scrolling through her phone, humming a song. I studied her, wondering how she could carry such darkness so casually. Her eyes sparkled as if life was simple, as if there wasn't a death sentence hanging between us. I wanted to grab her shoulders, shake her, demand the truth. But instead, I asked, "Are you ready for the party?" She smiled faintly, eyes never leaving her screen. "More than you think." I went upstairs later and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked older, weaker than I remembered. There were lines on my face I hadn't noticed before, shadows under my eyes carved from sleepless nights. I touched the glass, whispering, "You have to survive this." But survival felt like a cruel fantasy. The enemy wasn't a stranger. It was the child I had raised, the one who once clung to me when she was scared of thunder. Each day crawled closer to the party, and with it, the signs multiplied. Flowers arrived at the house, ordered in her name, catering receipts piled on the counter, and tucked among them, almost hidden, another slip of paper. A life insurance claim form with my name on it. My knees buckled. She wasn't just planning my death. She was preparing to profit from it. I wanted to scream, to run, to burn the house down, just to erase every trace of her scheme. But fear kept me shackled. Fear and love. Because, despite it all, she was still my daughter. And part of me prayed it was a mistake, that she would change, that she would remember I was her mother. That hope was the cruelest prison of all. I didn't know how much longer I could endure. Every shadow felt like a threat, every door creak a warning. I lay awake each night, counting the days, the hours, until her birthday, until my deadline. The walls of the house seemed to whisper it too, closing in tighter with each sunrise. 1 week left. And then, just as I thought I couldn't bear another revelation, I opened her closet searching for answers, and found a small, locked box at the very bottom. The kind that hides secrets too heavy for drawers or folders. My fingers grazed the cold metal, and my heart pounded as I realized whatever was inside might finally reveal everything, or it might destroy me before the week was over. The box was heavier than I expected, small but dense, like it carried not just objects, but truths. I pulled it out from the back of her closet, dust clinging to my fingers. The lock stared at me, mocking my desperation. For a moment I considered smashing it open right there, but fear stopped me. What if she walked in? What if she already knew I had found it? My breath came shallow as I slid it under my bed, the secret now burning between us, waiting. All night I couldn't sleep, my mind circling that box. What was inside? Papers? Photos? Proof? Or worse, weapons meant for me? Every sound in the house kept me on edge. The hum of the refrigerator, the crack of the wooden beams, even her faint laughter spilling from her room. It was like she knew I was close to uncovering something, and the thought made my skin crawl. The next day, while she was out, I dragged the box back onto the floor. My hands shook as I used a hammer to crack the lock. The snap echoed through the room, final and terrifying. I lifted the lid slowly, the smell of paper and metal rushing out. Inside, stacked neatly, were folders bound with string, labeled with dates and names. My name appeared on almost every one. I opened the first folder and felt my heart stop. It was filled with contracts, consultations with lawyers, inheritance drafts, notes scribbled in her handwriting. Words like transfer, claim, finalize jumped at me from the pages. Each document was meticulous, signed, and stamped. She hadn't just thought about this. She had prepared it with precision, step by step, like a business plan. My death wasn't just an idea. It was an operation. Digging deeper, I found photos. Dozens of them. Me cooking, me cleaning, me walking down the street alone, even pictures of me at night, through the crack of my bedroom door. My hand flew to my mouth as bile rose in my throat. These weren't memories. They were evidence. Proof of my existence, carefully documented so it could later be erased. And then I found the most chilling piece. A letter addressed to an attorney. Upon my mother's passing, I request immediate execution of her will. My name was typed beneath it, lifeless, as if I were already gone. The paper slipped from my trembling hands. I felt like the walls of the room were collapsing, pressing in on me, suffocating me with every breath. My daughter hadn't been acting alone. In one folder, receipts showed payments to a man's name, the same one I saw on the earlier documents. A stranger, yet one already woven into my fate. Who was he? A lawyer? An accomplice? A predator circling the remains of my life? My stomach twisted as I realized she wasn't just cruel. She was connected. I sat on the floor, surrounded by papers, tears streaking down my face. Memories of her as a child flashed before me. Her first steps, her tiny hand clinging to mine, her laughter when I chased her through the park. How could the same little girl now orchestrate my end with such coldness? Where had I gone wrong? Had love blinded me to the monster she was becoming? I stuffed the documents back into the box, but I couldn't unsee what I had seen. My hands shook as I returned it under the bed. The house no longer felt like mine. It felt like a stage where I was both the actor and the target. Each room whispered betrayal. Each object seemed poisoned with her plans. Later that night, she came home humming, carrying bags from the store. She placed them on the counter. Balloons, candles, decorations for the party. Her eyes sparkled as she pulled out a golden banner that read, "Happy Birthday." I stared at it, my chest tightening, because I knew what that banner meant. It wasn't just a celebration. It was the finish line for me. She caught me watching her and raised an eyebrow. "What?" she asked. I forced a smile, my lips trembling. "Nothing, just thinking how fast time flies." She laughed, shaking her head. "Not fast enough." Her words lingered in the air, sharp and deliberate. She knew. I didn't know how much she suspected, but she knew I was cracking. I lay in bed that night, listening again. Her voice drifted from her room, low and secretive. "Everything is ready. She won't make it past the day." My pulse spiked, sweat breaking across my skin. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. She was savoring it, feeding on the countdown like it was her fuel. I turned on my side, clutching my pillow, whispering prayers to a God I wasn't sure was listening. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but fear kept them wide open. Every shadow in the room looked like a figure, every creak like a step closer to my end. The box under my bed pulsed in my mind, as if it were alive, demanding I act before it was too late. At dawn, I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. I would find out who that man was. I would trace his name, confront the truth, no matter how dangerous it was. Because if I didn't, I would be gone before her birthday candles were lit. And as I pulled the folder back out to memorize the name, another piece of paper slipped out I hadn't noticed before. A plane ticket. Not for me, but for her. A one-way ticket, leaving the very morning after her party. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just planning to erase me. She was planning to disappear, too. The plane ticket lay across my lap like a confession. Its edges crumpled under the weight of my trembling fingers. One way, paid in cash, scheduled for the morning after her birthday. She wasn't just planning my death. She was planning her escape. My mind raced, picturing her boarding that flight, leaving behind nothing but silence and an empty house. For the first time, I understood the scope of her plan. She wanted freedom, money, a clean slate, and I was the price she was willing to pay. That evening, when she walked through the door, I couldn't keep it in anymore. The words burst from my throat before I had time to think. "How long have you been planning this?" My voice cracked, high and raw. She froze, the grocery bag dangling from her hand, her eyes narrowing like a predator assessing its prey. "Planning what?" she said, her tone calm, almost bored. The way she said it made my skin crawl. "You know what?" I snapped, my chest heaving. "The forged papers, the recordings, the ticket. Do you think I don't see?" Her jaw clenched, but then just as quickly, it relaxed. And then she laughed, a short, sharp laugh that sliced through me. "Finally," she said, dropping the bag on the counter with a thud. "I was wondering when you'd stop pretending." My stomach knotted. She wasn't denying it. She was admitting it. Her mask had slipped, and the truth was uglier than I ever imagined. She stepped closer, her eyes glinting under the kitchen light. "You gave me everything, Mom. And now, you've got nothing left to give. You're just in the way." I flinched, my back hitting the edge of the counter. My daughter, the little girl I once rocked to sleep, was telling me to my face that my existence was a burden. And worse, she meant it. I wanted to scream, to slap her, to shake her out of whatever darkness had consumed her. But I stood frozen, staring at the stranger she had become. Or maybe, the stranger she had always been. "I did everything for you," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Every sacrifice, every tear. I gave you my life." She shrugged, her expression cold. "And I never asked you to." Those words ripped through me deeper than any knife. I thought she might stop there, that some part of her would remember love, guilt, anything. But instead, she leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear. "Do you want to know the truth?" she whispered. "You've already been dead to me for years." My knees buckled, and I clutched the counter for balance. The cruelty in her voice was deliberate, sharpened like a blade. I staggered back, pressing my hands against my face, trying to block out her words. But they echoed anyway, over and over, drowning me. Dead to me. Dead to me. My chest ached so fiercely I thought my heart might stop. When I looked at her again, I searched for a flicker of the child I loved, but all I saw was triumph. She grabbed an apple from the bag, biting into it with a loud crunch, as if our confrontation was nothing more than background noise. Juice dripped down her fingers, and she licked it slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. "Why so scared?" she asked, smiling faintly. "You knew this day would come." I shook my head, whispering, No, I didn't. But maybe part of me always had. I remembered every red flag I had ignored, the humiliations, the threats, the laughter at my expense. I told myself it was rebellion, immaturity, a phase. But it wasn't. It was the truth, revealing itself piece by piece, until tonight, when she tore the mask off completely. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't hiding. She was proud. I wanted to leave right then, to run out the door and never look back. But fear rooted me to the floor. Fear of her, fear of being alone, fear of the unknown. My entire life had been built around her, and now I realized she had built hers around my destruction. The room spun, the ground tilting beneath me, and still she stood there, calm, chewing her apple. Finally, I found the strength to whisper, "Why? Why me?" She laughed again, a cruel sound that echoed through the walls. "Because you're weak, because you're nothing without me, and because I want it all." Her eyes flicked toward the documents I had found. The house, the future she had already claimed as hers. She wasn't just killing me. She was erasing me, rewriting the story with herself as the only character that mattered. Tears blurred my vision, hot and relentless. I had given her my life, and she had sharpened it into a weapon against me. My love had been her fuel, and now it was her justification. I thought of my mother, my grandmother, the women who came before me, who had sacrificed for family. Would they have seen this coming? Would they have warned me that sometimes the child you love most becomes the one who destroys you? She leaned back against the counter, tossing the apple core into the trash. "You should be grateful," she said, wiping her hands. "At least your death will mean something. It'll give me everything I deserve." The arrogance in her voice froze me to the bone. She wasn't just cruel. She was certain. And then, as she turned to leave the kitchen, she dropped something on the floor without noticing. A folded envelope, thick and heavy. I bent down slowly, my fingers brushing the paper. My heart stuttered as I opened it and saw what was inside. Photographs, not of me, but of the man whose name was on all the documents. My daughter wasn't just plotting with him. She was meeting him. And the last picture showed them together, smiling, her hand on his arm. The photos slipped from my hands and scattered across the floor, their glossy surfaces catching the kitchen light. I dropped to my knees, my chest heaving, as the truth spread out before me. My daughter wasn't just conspiring with a faceless stranger. She was close to him. Too close. Her hand rested on his arm in one photo, her head tilted toward him in another, both of them smiling as if they'd already won. I gathered the pictures in shaking hands, bile rising in my throat. I barely had time to hide them before she reappeared in the doorway, her shadow stretching across the tiles. "What are you doing down there?" she asked casually, sipping from a glass of water. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "Dropped something," I muttered, forcing a weak smile. She narrowed her eyes, but didn't press further. Still, her gaze lingered on me too long, like she was peeling back my skin to see what I was hiding. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the man. Who was he to her? A lawyer, a lover, a partner in this monstrous scheme? Every possibility was worse than the last. My mind spun as I pictured them laughing together, planning my death like a weekend getaway. I lay awake until dawn, clutching the envelope to my chest, as if it were the last proof of my sanity. By morning, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just sit and wait anymore. I dug through the papers again, looking for his name, his details. When I finally traced one of the receipts to an office downtown, my blood turned to ice. He wasn't just anyone. He was an attorney who specialized in probate law, wills, inheritance, the kind of man who made fortunes from the dead, from people like me. The realization hit harder than a slap. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a transaction. My daughter had sold me for property, for money, for freedom. She had found a man to make it legal, to make it clean. Together, they were writing me out of existence. My body shook as I gripped the papers, the ink blurring under my tears. That evening, the house was buzzing with preparations. She moved through the rooms like a queen, arranging her court, hanging banners, arranging flowers, checking her phone every few minutes. I watched from the doorway, silent, invisible, my heart breaking and boiling all at once. She wasn't planning a celebration. She was planning a show, and I was the sacrifice. I clenched my fists, the photos digging into my palm. I couldn't let her win. Not like this. Not silently. I remembered every humiliation, every slap of her words, every night I starved so she could eat. My rage boiled into resolve. If she wanted a spectacle, then I would give her one, and I would not go quietly. The night of the party arrived like a storm. The house filled with laughter, music, voices echoing against the walls. People toasted her, showered her with compliments, calling her beautiful, radiant, deserving. My stomach twisted at their words, knowing what lay beneath her smile. I stood at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, clutching the envelope of proof like a weapon. When the cake was brought out, candles glowing, everyone gathered around her, cheering. My breath caught as I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the wood. Conversations hushed, heads turned. The room froze as I appeared, pale and trembling, holding the documents above my head. Gasps spread like wildfire. "This," I said, my voice breaking but loud enough to fill the silence, "is the daughter you're celebrating." I slammed the photos and papers onto the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The guests leaned forward, whispers rippling as they saw the forged will, the contracts, the photos of her with the man. My daughter's face drained of color, her jaw clenching as eyes turned toward her. For the first time, she looked cornered. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in her eyes, but only for a second. She straightened, her lips curling into a bitter smile. "She's lying," she said coldly. "She's sick. She forged those herself." Her words cut the air, but her hands trembled as she pushed the papers aside. People murmured, doubt and confusion mixing with the scent of smoke from the candles. I stepped closer, my voice trembling but fierce. "Every sacrifice I made, every piece of myself I gave, you turned into a weapon, and now you want me gone. Tell them, tell everyone here what you wished for your birthday." The room erupted into whispers, faces pale, eyes darting between us. My daughter's hands balled into fists, her mask slipping as rage burned through her calm facade. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. And then she screamed, her voice cracking through the crowd. "Yes! I wished she would die!" Gasps filled the air. Guests stepping back, glasses clattering against tables. Her words echoed in the stunned quiet, the confession too raw to be dismissed as a lie. My chest ached, my tears hot and relentless, but a grim clarity settled inside me. Because in that moment, as everyone stared, I realized the party wasn't just her stage. It was mine, too. And I had forced her to rip off the mask in front of everyone she wanted to impress. She was exposed, raw, and burning with hatred. But as her eyes locked on mine, filled with fury, I knew this wasn't over. She might have cracked tonight, but she wasn't finished. She leaned in, her whisper cutting through the noise only for me. "You'll pay for this." And when she pulled back, her smile returned for the guests, flawless as ever. My hands shook, my body weak, but I stood my ground. I had dragged her into the light, but in doing so, I had lit a fire I couldn't control. The party would end. The guests would leave. And then it would be just us again, in this house full of shadows. And as I stared down at the scattered papers on the table, I noticed something new, a single envelope I hadn't placed there. My name was scrawled across it in a hand I didn't recognize. I reached for it, my pulse racing, already knowing this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something even darker. The envelope trembled in my hands as the room buzzed with murmurs. I tore it open, the paper rough against my fingertips, my vision swimming from fear and adrenaline. Inside was a short, typed letter. No signature, no greeting, just a single line that froze me where I stood. The plan is still in motion. Tonight. My breath caught, the sound of the guests fading into silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath with me. I shoved the letter into my pocket before anyone could see, forcing my face to stay neutral. My daughter's eyes burned into me from across the table, her smile brittle, her knuckles white as she clutched a glass. The guests clapped awkwardly, the tension hanging like smoke. They thought it was just family drama, a fight between mother and daughter. They didn't see the knife beneath her words, the trap still tightening around me. When the last guest left, the silence in the house was deafening. Balloons swayed gently from the ceiling. The banner shimmered in the dim light, and the uneaten cake sat on the counter like a cruel joke. She stood by the door, arms crossed, her expression calm once more. "That was a mistake," she whispered, her voice low but sharp. "You think embarrassing me changes anything? It only makes it worse." I leaned against the table, my body trembling from exhaustion. "I've already shown them who you are," I said, my voice weak but steady. "They'll remember what you admitted." She smirked, tilting her head. "Do you think anyone will care tomorrow? They'll say you were emotional. They'll say you misunderstood. And when you're gone, they'll forget." Her words were poison, sliding down my spine. I wanted to scream, to collapse, to give up, but something inside me refused. Maybe it was anger, maybe survival, maybe the faintest spark of self-respect I had buried for years. "I won't make it easy for you," I said, my hands gripping the table until my knuckles turned white. For the first time, her smile faltered. Just a flicker, but it was enough to keep me standing. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, the letter on my lap, the shadows pressing close around me. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind like a whisper. My chest tightened with every minute that passed. Tonight, the word throbbed in my mind like a drumbeat. I didn't know how or when, but I knew she, or whoever was helping her, would try again. I thought of leaving, of running into the night, but fear chained me to the house. Where would I go? Who would believe me? And worst of all, what if leaving only made it easier for them to finish what they started? I stayed, waiting, my ears straining at every sound. Hours crawled by, each one heavier than the last. Just before dawn, I heard it. A faint metallic click from the back door. My heart stopped. I gripped the arm of the chair, my body stiff as stone. Someone was inside. The steps were soft, deliberate, moving slowly through the kitchen. My daughter's door never opened, but somehow I knew she was awake, listening, waiting too. I held my breath, praying I wouldn't be found in the dark. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just outside the living room. I clenched my fists, ready to fight, ready to scream. But then, just as suddenly, they retreated. The back door clicked again. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. I sat frozen, tears sliding down my face, the letter burning in my hand. The night had passed, but tomorrow was still waiting. At sunrise, I packed. Not much, just enough to leave without a trace. A bag with clothes, the documents, the photos, the letter. I moved quietly, my eyes darting to her door every few seconds. She slept, or pretended to. I couldn't tell. But I knew if I stayed another day, the house would swallow me whole. Before leaving, I walked into her room one last time. She lay there, eyes closed, her breathing steady. For a moment, I almost believed she looked like the child I once knew, innocent, fragile. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, my heart aching. "You lost the greatest gift," I whispered, my voice breaking. "A mother's love." She didn't stir, or maybe she just didn't care. I left the house in silence, the bag heavy on my shoulder, my chest hollow. The street outside was quiet, the world still asleep. Each step away from that house felt like a step out of a grave I had been buried in for years. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I might never leave. Days passed before I could breathe again. I found shelter miles away, in a place where her shadow couldn't reach me. I rebuilt slowly, piece by fragile piece, learning to exist without her, learning to remember who I was before the humiliation, before the cruelty. The scars remain, but so does the will to survive. What would you have done differently? Would you have stayed, confronted her again, tried to save her? Or would you have left, like I did? Tell me in the comments. I want to know if love can survive betrayal this deep. But just when I thought I was free, when the nightmares began to fade, a new letter arrived at my door. No return address. Just one line, written in the same shaky type as before. "You can't run forever." My hands shook as I held it, the old fear rushing back. And I realized my story with her wasn't over. Not yet.